Hi, and welcome to Drug-Free Safety Program 1-hour employee training presented by Ascent Safety Solutions. My name is Michael Powell. Got quite a bit of experience in the law enforcement field. Just recently started my 45th year with law enforcement, about 33 years as a regular officer, and the past 12 years as a prevention specialist. 39 years in the narcotics field, been involved somewhere around 6,000 counts of drug trafficking, about 2,000 search warrants, federal and local. And then for 7 years of my career, I supervised the FBI drug task force in Central Ohio. And that was a great assignment for me because it gave me a much wider view of the drug problem, not only in Ohio, but the entire country, the nation, the world. Basically, with the FBI, I wasn't permitted to open a case on a cartel or an organization unless I could show headquarters in D.C. that particular group of individuals was affecting the entire country, not just the state of Ohio. So obviously, for about 7 years of my career, the cases took me all over the U.S. Shortly after 9/11, decided I want to leave the FBI, go back to sheriff's office, and finish my career locally with training. However, back in '04, parts of Ohio were designated by the federal government what's called a HIDTA area. As you can see from the PowerPoint there, HIDTA, High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. And as you can all see from the PowerPoint, Ohio is not alone in that designation. All 50 states carry that designation in certain parts of their state. Till I went into semi-retirement in March of '06, I supervised what's called the Southwest Border Initiative. If you take a look at your southwestern border with Mexico, we have approximately 1,889 miles worth of border with that country. Most of the illicit, the illegal drugs you'll find in every one of our communities throughout the nation comes across that border controlled by those cartels. So for the final 2 years of my active career, I supervised that Southwest Border Initiative. So any of the drugs coming across that part of our border into Central Ohio fell within my crew.
Hello, my name is Sean Bain, and I've been in law enforcement for the last 33 years. I've worked everywhere in law enforcement, from jail divisions to patrol to canine. I was on our SWAT team for several years. 1994 is when I got my first chance to work narcotics. So for the better part of the last 22 years or so of my full-time career was spent working drug cases. Been involved in thousands of undercover drug buys, thousands of search warrants, both at the state and federal level. The last 5 years of my career, I supervised the task force right in the center of the state called the Franklin County HIDTA Drug Task Force. And our jobs were to combat all the different drug crimes in and around Central Ohio. Everything from that street corner drug dealer all the way to the southwest border involving the Mexican cartels. So it was very similar to Mike's assignment he had with the FBI. However, my assignment was with DEA. I'm also assigned as the drug intelligence officer for the state of Ohio through this group called Ohio HIDTA. A little over 2 years ago now, we started something called the Heroin Fentanyl Response Strategy. So if you look at the map of the U.S. and you look at Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, and all states east, those were the 20 original states involved with this strategy. Just this past January, we added on Indiana and Illinois for a total of 22 states. But why those original 20 states? Because that's where everyone's dying. You're going to see within this first hour block we have with you that Ohio is now top three in the country when it comes to total overdose deaths. The state of Ohio, the state of Pennsylvania, and Florida are vying for that top spot, unfortunately. You're also going to see before you leave this next hour that we now have more fentanyl in the United States than ever before. Fentanyl is actually pushing heroin out of the state of Ohio and out of our country. We're going to start out by talking about a few statistics. Not going to overburden you with stats, but I think these next 3 slides will give you a true indication why it's so important that we have drug training. The first slide you can see is going to be national statistics back in 2016. Now 2016, some of you may be thinking these stats are old, but this is the best we got. We won't have the official stats out for 2017, probably till sometime next year. So 2016, if you look at the map here, the state of Ohio was at 39.1. The only state that we trail in this category, death rates per 100,000, is the state of West Virginia. They were at 52. So they beat the nation by far. Now let's look at Ohio a little bit more specific. What I'm going to do in these next 2 slides is compare the 2015 stats to 2016. If you look at the state of Ohio, you can see each one of these little red dots represented on this map is the equivalent of a drug overdose death and where it occurred back in 15. Each one of those little red dots, if you total them up, the total will be 3,310. And you can obviously see the hotspot areas, our major metropolitan areas. Naturally, the more people in that area, the more urban the area, they're going to be more be unfortunately more deaths. But if you look at some more rural areas, because Mike and I do a lot of programs in more rural areas of the state. Recently we were up in near Toledo, Ohio, doing a presentation, and there were a couple people in the audience that lived over in more rural areas to the west of Toledo. And they were looking at their counties and they were thinking, well, we only had like 6 overdose deaths in our county in 2015. We're not doing too bad over here. Well, if you think about it this way, if I have heroin issues and I live in a rural part of northwest Ohio, where am I probably going to go to get my heroin? Into the big city, Toledo. So if I go into Toledo, get my heroin, unfortunately overdose and die, where's my number going to probably be counted? In Toledo and Lucas County. So some of these numbers can be skewed. There is not a county, the 88, the state of Ohio, that isn't having issues. Now, 2015, we had 3310. Let's take it one step further to 16. That 3310 went to 4329 in 1 year. You can see the huge increase. Just talked to one of my contacts with the Ohio Department of Health just a couple months ago, and she was saying for 2017, those stats will probably be somewhere between 5,000 and 5,500. Where will this all end? I don't know, but I sure hope it ends soon, because we are literally losing a generation to these overdose deaths.
Okay, Sean and I have an hour with you, and we realize that you are here because of your profession, but most of you are parents or will be parents. Maybe some are even grandparents. So we're going to give you a wide view. What's relevant in the workplace is also very relevant at home. And really what's sad, and I'm not trying to offend anyone out there, Sean and I are in a lot of the middle schools and the high schools. I personally have been lecturing in middle schools throughout this part of the country since 1982. And the program for the teens is a lot different what we show you today. We don't show the kids a lot of the things we're going to be showing you. It's more about choices and situations. But what is really kind of sad is many times we go into that 7th and 8th grade and those kids know more than their parents, and yet we wonder why so many are dying. When you look at our country, we're less than 5% of the world's population, yet we abuse more dope than any other country in the world. Over 50% of the world's illicit cocaine is consumed in our country. When you look at all the illegal drugs, the ones you can never possess in our country, like the K2 drugs, the so-called bath salt type of drugs, which had nothing to do with real bath salts, the drug called Molly or ecstasy that so many of the kids are talking about, and the heroin, totally illegal, but our country does 60% of them. How about the pharmaceuticals? Isn't that a huge problem? Sure is. When you look at the pharmaceuticals in the world, our country consumes 75% of all pharmaceuticals. And within the pharmaceutical group of pills, we have what's called the opioids. Those are your pain pills. The Oxycontin, the Percocet, the Vicodin, the Norco, Tylenol 3, Tylenol 4, the Opana, the Duragesic, the fentanyl coming from the Duragesic patch, and the Demerol, the morphine, and Dilaudid. Our country does 80% of them. If you're all familiar with hydrocodone, which is Norco or Vicodin, our country does 99%, and we wonder why so many are dying. We're one of 2 countries, New Zealand being number 2, that has advertisements in the media for our pills. And what do all those ugly numbers mean? It means we have more teens and more adults abusing, dependent, addicted, overdosing, and dying than any other country in the world. And when you look at the big picture, the way you look at this is the drug business is like any other business, maybe like yours. It's about manufacturing and marketing and packaging, distribution, competition, and it's cash flow. It's all about that money. Sean and I right now average 3 to 4 interventions every single week in this part of the state, where we spend time with families, lost a loved one, maybe multiple loved ones, or with families that have a loved one struggling with substance use disorder. And what we see so many times within those interventions is a lot of enabling. What do I mean by that? Well, let's picture that somebody gets a phone call and they say, hey, did you hear about Jimmy? Jimmy's smoking a little bit of weed, drinking a little bit of alcohol, always going to school. And that individual sits back and says, well, you know, it's just a little bit of weed, it's some alcohol, I'm not gonna say anything, it'll pass. Just what we do in our country. Matter of fact, when I was a little younger, I drank quite a bit when I was going to school. I smoked a little weed, it'll pass. So I'm just not gonna say anything. And by not saying anything, that permits so many of those Jimmies to continue down that path of life using drugs in an improper way. And then picture what happens so many times. Whether that's a year and a half later, that same person gets a call and they say, hey, did you hear about Jimmy? He just overdosed, almost died. He's in the hospital right now on heroin and fentanyl. They get him on life support. They don't know if he's gonna make it. Then what's everybody wanna do? We want to grab our cell phones and send a text, or we want to make a call. Hey, how's Jimmy doing? They're saying he's on life support. Anything I can do? Can I come and see him? I'm there for you if you need me. You guys are in my prayers. And we send that text or we make that call because actually we do care. But don't you think it's a little late showing that we care? I do. When it comes to drug abuse in our country, I kind of tie it to stages of cancer. I've recently lost 2 family members to cancer, and I'm sure everyone out there would agree with me. About the time that that doctor calls you in for that consultation and sits you down and says you have cancer, you are praying to God that it's stage 1. You don't want it to be stage 3 or 4, like with my family, lost both of them in 5 months. But when it comes to drug abuse, whether it's the kids knowing the other kids are doing a drug, or fellow employees that know another employee is maybe using a drug in an improper way, we're going to wait until it's stage 2, 3, or 4 before we want to jump in and get that person assistance. What we're saying for you today is this: to stand up to help that fellow employee, that individual that you care about, maybe in your personal life, to get them into maybe some type of an employee assistance program or some insurance program that's going to help them with that problem, instead of us sitting back and waiting till it's so far down that path of cancer. That's why we do the training today.
Yeah, if you look at the PowerPoint, this is something that I think is a really scary trend. If you look at what we're showing you here, 2015 in the nation, 165 people lost their lives on the job to a drug overdose death. Compare that 1 year later to 2016, it jumped up to 217. We're talking a 32% increase in 1 year. If you look at the chart, we're talking from 11 to 2016, drug deaths at work tripled. And that is an alarming trend that we're going through right now.
All right, you can see from the agenda there that's shown on the many different drugs that we would cover. And we're going to be aware of something here. You know, a lot of times, whether it's a workplace or home, if you have someone in your world you suspect of using a drug in an improper way, a lot of times what you're doing is looking for the drug, and very seldom do you find the drug. And by the time you usually find the drug, it's pretty late down that path that I was referring to before. Today, we want you to be more aware of odors that you might pick up of that individual in front of you. Does it make sense why that odor is emanating from that individual at that precise time? Or maybe it's the terminology, the social network, especially when it comes to the young people in your world. Or maybe it's a phrase that they put there that just gets your attention. Or maybe it's a tiny little device that didn't mean a thing to you till that tragic day occurred. Sean and I go into local head shops, paraphernalia shops throughout this part of the nation. And if you want to see what's happening in your community, we suggest you go in and take a look there. These businesses would not be carrying these items we're going to share with you unless they're making money from those items. So we're going to show you a lot of items appear to be something other than what they actually are. An example is the lipstick container Sean and I spent $15 for. When you take a look at this, take the cap off, you can see it doesn't look like real lipstick. You can see on the end there's a tiny little hole that should tell you right now it's probably a pipe. And all she has to do when she's ready to smoke is pull that out. You see the tiny little bowl right there. They're going to take a simple little water faucet screen that Sean's going to show you here, and they're going to put that little water faucet screen in the bottom of that pipe.
Yeah, and you can see we have a whole box of water faucet screens. They sell these water faucet screens in the head shops, paraphernalia shops. Why? Screen for a pipe. So you're going to take the size of that screen that fits that bowl that Mike showed you, put that in there, then pack your marijuana. Now you're good to smoke. So you definitely want to look for the water faucet screens.
If you have somebody in your world abusing a drug, Sean and I always suggest you check their trash. And yes, I mean the typical trash receptacle. I also mean the floorboard of the car, the bottom of the purse, and the pockets there. I'll guarantee you this: someone in your world using a drug in an improper way, they'll leave things behind. They'll discard or displace those things. If you can identify those little things, it'll help you identify what substance he or she might be using so you can intervene and get that person some assistance there. This next item, nothing more than appears to be a highlighter. Once again, Sean and I spent $15 for this, and you can buy any color you can imagine. It's available out there, and they'll work for a short period of time like this one did, but eventually they'll dry out like this one has. Here you just simply pull the metal pipe out of the bottom. There you can see the bowl right there. Put the water faucet screen, load light smoke. When they're finished, they're simply going to put the device away. Don't want you to think it's just story time. If you take a look at the PowerPoint there, Sean and I last year were lecturing up in Cleveland, a big conference for foster parents. We met the mother of a young man. She had custody of this 14-year-old that was supposedly in the bathroom taking a shower. Well, the mother can smell marijuana coming from the bathroom. She finally gets the young man to open the door. She goes inside. He's got the steam going on, got the air vent going on, and she finds this highlighter. She did something that all of us should do when we find an item. Her first thought was, why would he have a highlighter in the shower? Obviously, you wouldn't. You see, she pulls it apart. It's identical to the one I just showed you, other than the color.
You know, it's interesting when you go into these head shops, because paraphernalia shops, it's a word game. Because if someone's working in the head shop and I go up and say, hey, do you have a crack pipe you can sell me? Obviously, they know we're using that particular pipe to use an illegal drug, so they can be charged with selling drug paraphernalia. They're too smart for that. They've been trained by their attorneys what they can and cannot say. So now if you go into one of the paraphernalia shops, you'll have to say things like, hey, I've got some products I want to smoke. Where are your pipes? Then they're going to show you the pipes that Mike was just showing you. Or, hey, I've got some valuables I want to hide. Where are your safes? The next couple items we're going to show you are what they consider safes in the head shops, like this Ritz Bits container. We leave the stickers on these so everyone can kind of tell how much we're paying for them. $22.95 for this. A lot of times you can get these 10 for 10 at some of our supermarkets. Obviously that's a clue, so we're going to peel that off of there. You keep a steady supply of the fresh Ritz Bits in the top, but you can see the bottom of this Ritz Bits unscrews, and then there's a false bottom. I can hide the drug, put the bottom back on, and then we're good to go. This Coke container. One of our officers was impounding a car, and he gets to the floorboard area, and he finds this Coke container on the floorboard, one just like this one. So he's naturally picking it up to move it around. When he picks it up, he notices it's very solid to the touch. Starts to mess with it, figures out the top unscrews, and with this one, the person had $800 worth of crystal methamphetamine secreted in the center of these. Other type of items that we see all the time are these type. This just looks like a regular cell phone from a distance. You get up close, you can tell it's not a real cell phone. It's got a plastic cover. You simply pop that off, you turn it on, and this one's a digital scale. So you can weigh up all those drugs you have there in the house or in the vehicle. Again, to show you this isn't story time, if you look at the PowerPoint, good evidence of how many of these are across the country is our narcotic search warrants that officers are doing. Like this one, you can see the top picture. You got Jif peanut butter, sugar containers with false centers. The bottom pictures, you got athlete foot spray, Pledge furniture polish, false bottoms. This particular search warrant, we pulled out over 4,000 Oxycontin tablets from safes like that throughout the house.
Okay, we're going to talk now about the #1 drug of abuse, not only in the country and the workplace, but basically in the world, alcohol. I'm going to spend a little time with you on this particular drug. And I'm not going to read all of these stats there on the PowerPoint for you. You guys can see that. I do want you to be aware of something. And once again, we're here to give you that big picture. If you recall, I told you that Sean and I average 3 to 4 interventions every single week, okay, in this part of the country. And you know, right now, most of those families are talking about the opioids, they're talking about the heroin, they're talking about the fentanyl. And they should be, because obviously those are deadly, dangerous substances. But when you look at the big picture, really, there's no comparison. And once again, we're going to show you some stats back from 2016. Remember, it takes us quite some time to get national stats. And you can see from 15 to 16, the increase, the non-alcohol overdose deaths there going up 21%. Then you talk about the opioids, that's where the heroin, the fentanyl is. You can see that's up 27.5%. Alcohol, wow, much higher than either of those two, right between 88 to 89,000. So obviously alcohol is a huge problem in our country.
All right, let's get you caught up to speed on some of the newest things with alcohol. Some of this stuff you may be aware of. Some of this stuff's going to probably blow your mind like it did me. But we have to understand a lot of the youth today, a lot of the 20-somethings, they prefer the flavored alcohol or the alcohol that's mixed with an energy drink or with caffeine. Many of you probably remember the horror stories about the one there on the bottom right, Four Loko, where kids were going to a party, they're drinking a Four Loko. Next thing you know, they're waking up in the emergency room because they've overdosed on the alcohol. Reason being is before the FDA made the manufacturers of Four Loko and those other manufacturers separate that caffeine alcohol combination, before they did that, that 22-ounce container was like drinking 4 beers with a large cup of black coffee. So can you imagine an inexperienced drinker? You're drinking all that alcohol, combine it with the caffeine, you don't realize how drunk you're getting until you pass out. That's why on the street, people will call it blackout in a can. They'll call it liquid cocaine. They'll call them hand grenades. Is it important in our professional lives, here at work, and also our personal lives as a parent that we know street terminology? Because people are going to be texting it, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Kicks, WhatsApp. They're going to talk it right in front of us. And if we don't know what those terms mean, it's going to go right over our heads. So at the end of the program today, we're going to give you some websites that we use on a regular basis, and a couple of them are really good for street terminology. The next one, the buzzballs. Upper left, we see these a lot of our campus area bars around the state. Some of our markets, carryouts are now starting to sell the buzz balls. No matter what variety of the buzz balls you buy, they're all 40 proof, so 20% alcohol. The ones on the bottom left are called the pocket shots. Can't buy those yet in the state of Ohio, but if you want them bad enough, you can order them online from a company down in Texas. They'll ship them to you. Those, no matter what variety, are 80 proof, 40% alcohol. To me, they kind of remind me of like those carbohydrate boosters for long distance runners, but some young mothers have said no. To me, they look more like those new squeezable applesauce containers for kids. So again, you see, no matter what variety of these you buy, 40% alcohol. See how easy that would be. Put that back pocket of my jeans, take it to work or school with me. Some of the other things we see a lot with the kids, some with adults as well, but the drunky bears or the drunky worms. You can see by the slide there that what we're going to do with these is take a glass bowl or a Pyrex dish, put a whole package of gummy bears in there. Then I'm going to get my hands on my favorite alcohol. Let's say it's vodka. Now, why would I choose vodka? Least amount of smells and it's clear. So I take that fifth of vodka, pour it all over those gummy bears, let it soak in my bedroom overnight. I get up for school or work the next morning. What do I have? Well, now I have Arnold Schwarzenegger-sized gummy bears, you can see there on the bottom right, that are now 3 times their normal size because they've soaked up all that alcohol. 15, 20 of them, little plastic baggie, take them to school with me or work. Now I'm popping those gummy bears, get that alcohol in my system throughout the day. Vaporizing alcohol or huffing alcohol. If you're not familiar with this one, it's as easy as getting on YouTube and punch in huffing alcohol. You'll see all these videos pop up. One that I watched showed these kids with a wine bottle. You know, the cork in a wine bottle. We're going to take the cork out, pour a little wine out, put the cork back in. Bicycle tire pump, you got a little needle we fill up our basketballs with. We're going to put that needle down through the cork in a wine bottle, pump that wine bottle full of air. Once it's full of air, you take the cork out, you just huff on the air. You don't even have to drink the wine out to get drunk. Now, why would I want to huff alcohol instead of take it the traditional way? A couple benefits a lot of the young talk about, and that is one, don't want to get that beer belly. So if you huff it, it's 0 calories. Another one is it's much quicker. Think about the youth today. Kids want everything now. So if I take a shot of whiskey or drink a beer, my body has to process that alcohol through the body's organs the normal way. So it takes me a little while to get that buzz. But if I huff the alcohol, where's it going? Straight to the lungs, straight to the brain. I'm going to get drunk much, much quicker. So vaporizing alcohol is definitely a new trend we're hearing about. Palcohol or powdered alcohol. Big controversy with this one because about 2.5 years ago, the FDA approved this for human consumption in the United States. However, here in Ohio, our governor banned it about 6 months after that. He said, we're not going to do that in the state of Ohio. So you can no longer possess, consume, or sell it. Does that mean we'll never see it? Not necessarily. Go to a state where it's not illegal and bring it back. Or you can order it over the internet, have it shipped to you. So what is it? You basically take 1 ounce of that freeze-dried alcohol, you add it to 5 ounces of any liquid, now you have the equivalent of a mixed drink. But what could people do with powdered alcohol? Yeah, you could take that razor blade, scrape it in a line, cut that straw down, and snort it like you would cocaine. Or imagine this scenario. I'm in a bar, and I see a pretty girl sitting next to me at the bar. Her attention gets diverted from her drink. What can I do? I can slip that powdered alcohol in her already alcoholic drink to double shot her, to take advantage of her. So could this be used to facilitate a sexual assault? Sure it could. So we need to make sure we educate our loved ones in this. I don't care if you're at a neighborhood bar, or you're in a high school cafeteria with your buddies, or after high school with your buddies at McDonald's, never leave your drink left unattended. Got to educate our loved ones on this.
Okay, we're going to spend a little time with you now on marijuana. A very controversial drug right now throughout our nation, and I'm sure most of us in Ohio realize that back in September of 16, Ohio at that time became the 25th state to pass a law creating medical marijuana. What does that mean for us now? It's really pretty simple. What that means is by September of 2018, Ohio will be producing medical marijuana, prescribing or recommending, and filling those recommendations. So I'm going to talk about this. There are basically 21 different medical issues that one could be recommended medical marijuana. You should not be hearing the term prescribing medical marijuana because according to the federal government, marijuana is still a Schedule I drug. And by federal law, you cannot prescribe a Schedule I drug. So they'll be calling it a recommendation. Now, if the Fed moves marijuana to a lower schedule like the other substances, then we would hear that term prescribing. If the patient is on medical marijuana, they'll have to pay a $50 fee each year for their medical marijuana card. They can possess, and this is the way the law is right now, up to 90 days worth of medical marijuana. Like with any other drug, it's going to follow those same guidelines. They can possess the plant material, and when I'm lecturing or talking to you today, I'm talking about specifically the female plant, the bud of the female plant. She produces the THC, that powerful, most powerful cannabinoid within the plant. That's what gives them the sensation they get when they're smoking the drug. And as you can see from the PowerPoint, the plant material can be up to 35% THC. If they do possess the plant material, they can't smoke it a traditional way using a bong or a bowl or a blunt wrapper or a skin or a shell type of wrap. They will be able to vaporize the plant material, take the vapor in for medical use there. The state's going to permit them to have extractions of THC called oils or tincture. Tincture is nothing more than an alcohol extraction. And as you can see from the PowerPoint, that THC factors doubles up to 70%. As with other meds, we have the tablets, the pills, and we have the patches. We'll have the same thing here for medical marijuana. State also is going to permit edibles, but the state has a grave concern there. They've seen in other states where that concentrated THC, for some individuals, especially the younger, if you do some research out there, you'll see where some coroner's reports feel that some of the young people that had committed suicide with high THC levels in the brain, some of those coroner's reports believe that THC factor caused some of them to become delusional or a psychosis associated with that psychoactive substance, causing that individual to possibly commit the suicide there. So it's very controversial right now, and we're not sure exactly what those edibles will look like. Sean and I do know that they're going to be packaged, and that packaging will be very detailed as to what's inside that particular package. So we'll see how that's going to work out for us. Most doctors, not only in the state but in the nation, are not willing to recommend medical marijuana. Recently, Sean and I went through some training. It looks like we have at least 200 to 300 doctors in our state that will be willing to recommend it come September of 18. If they do, the doctor has to fill out a very detailed application. He's got to take a minimum of 2-hour training to actually recommend the medical marijuana. Most businesses that Sean and I have been speaking to for the last year or so, they're going to be zero tolerance for marijuana. The state of Ohio is just basically saying if your company decides they're going to permit medical marijuana to be in the workplace, that has to be covered in detail in your policy there. So we'll see how that's going to work out as far as the medical marijuana. Understand, being it's a Schedule I drug, most insurance companies are not going to be willing to pick up the cost factor for the medical marijuana. And some of that could be very, very pricey there. So we'll see how this all works out. It's yet to be determined on where the pharmacies or the dispensaries part will be there. We should be finding that out in the summer of 18. Okay, we're going to spend a little time with you now on pharmaceuticals. Sean and I actually could spend about 8 hours talking about these. If you recall, when we opened, I told you our country, the U.S., consumes 75% of all pharmaceuticals. We do 80% of all pain pills and about 99% of the hydrocodone products there. So somewhat shocking. Now you look here at the PowerPoint there, you see that bottom number where it talks about the Americans, 115 dying every day in our country from the opioids alone. We lose a total right now of about 174 per day, and 115 of those are on the opioids. When you look at the state of Ohio, and in fact a couple of years ago when Sean and I would be lecturing, I would be saying we were losing at that time right around 5.5 people a day. About a year later, we were at 8.5 people a day. Right now, we're at approximately 15 people a day dying in our state. So it tells you how severe this epidemic is. Now, I'm going to cover some of the more abused or diverted substances, but we want you to understand all of these meds are very good meds when taken properly. We're going to talk about the ADD, ADHD meds, very powerful stimulants. We see a lot of young people and not so young actually prescribed these powerful stimulants. And there's a lot of families that don't realize they've got the young ones on these these powerful stimulants don't realize how addictive and how diverted they actually are when it comes to American society. They don't realize that these drugs I'm going to be talking about, the ADD, ADHD, are in the same category or schedule as cocaine and methamphetamine. So they're very powerful. Sure, many of you are familiar with the one there on the left. Ritalin's been out for a number of decades. Very good when taken properly. 2001, they came out with a drug called Adderall to treat the same conditions Ritalin. And the hope was also wouldn't be so diverted, but as many of us are aware, it's heavily diverted. The big one right now is the third one over called Vyvanse. More scripts put out for this one, as you can see, a little over 4 million than the other three combined. So we see a lot of that diverted. Terminology is very, very important for us. You'll notice in the bottom picture there, the Vyvanse, you'll notice those capsules. Those are 70 milligrams. It's the biggest you can get right now. You might make note of the color. They're red and blue. So a lot of times the users, and I'm talking about the young, and by that I mean middle school, high school, college kids, right now in this part of the country are calling them Superman. So we got to be aware of that terminology. You hear a term or a phrase in your world, get your attention. Take a much closer look at it. Okay, we're going to talk now about benzos. They can be very, very dangerous. For many individuals, they abruptly stop taking or using these type of drugs, the benzos, just the physical withdrawal without medical assistance. For some of them, they could actually die from the physical withdrawal. And you'll know the benzos primarily as Valium or diazepam, or the one there on the PowerPoint, Xanax. Xanax is one of the most prescribed drugs in the world today, and one that is so diverted. Probably not a bar anywhere in our communities in the nation where you can't go in and buy a Xanax. So much of that is diverted. Different colors, different milligrams, different terms for a lot of the young people that I'm talking about here. The upper left, you'll notice they're yellow. During the school year, a lot of young will use the term school bus, riding that school bus, stuck on that school bus. Could they be talking about a real bus, or are they talking about this drug? We have to be aware of that. The upper right, you can see, is the shape of a football. That's a very popular term during the football season. You'll notice one in the bottom right, the green ones. Those are 2 milligrams, and because of that green color, many will call them hawks. You know, this year, Sean and I, lecturing in 4 different middle schools, we had 4 administrators tell us that the kids in the middle schools, because of that green color, were calling them beans, talking about on social network, can you bring some of those beans to school? I want some of your beans there. So once again, pay close attention to the terminology. The lower left, some of you are familiar with these, they're called Zanies or Zany bars. They're 2 milligrams. Sometimes they'll refer to them as handlebars. You'll notice they're long like a bar. That's where that term comes from. And you notice on each bar, there's 3 lines or 3 scores. So if you hold that bar up, to some it appears to be a ladder. So you hear someone talking about stuck on that ladder, can't get off that ladder. Could he be talking about the Xanax? A lot of the young will lay that ladder down, and to them, it looks like a sidewalk. So you hear someone talking about that sidewalk. Once again, you want to look at that big picture there. Hydrocodone, if you remember, I talked about this earlier in this training session. You know it primarily as Norco or Vicodin. In our country, does 99% of the hydrocodone in our country. You know, there's many times that Sean and I have been doing drug awareness training in the workplace, and then we'll get a phone call either shortly thereafter or the following day or whatever from one of the employees. They're saying, hey, I didn't want to say anything in front of my peers, but I have a loved one struggling with the opioids. They're doing the pain pills, and they're claiming now that they're not doing the heroin, but they've lied to me so much. I don't know what the truth is. I come to work, I struggle working because I don't know if they're going to overdose and the coroner's going to call me, the police are going to arrest my child, or maybe they're home stealing like they've done so many times with their friends. Is there anything I can do if I have someone in my world, my loved one, abusing the opioids that would tell me without a drug test that they're actually on the pain pills or heroin and fentanyl? And yes, there is. What we suggest you do with that loved one is you take that individual into a room, shut all the lights off, make it dark there. When it's dark, your pupils should be dilating. They should be huge. They're searching for light so you can see. What we suggest you do is take a flashlight or a pen light, your smartphone flashlight, and work the pupil rapidly back and forth with that loved one. And what you should see when you're working that light back and forth, you should see constriction, dilation, constriction, dilation. If that individual is on the opioids, whether it's the pain pills or the heroin or fentanyl, you will not see dilation. Those pupils will remain pinpoint constricted. That is a given when it comes to abusing the opioids. This next one, very big one throughout our country, it's been a problem, not just our country, kind of all over the world. Oxycodone. You'll know that primarily as Percocet or Percodan. Same drug. Cet means acetaminophen. Percodan has aspirin. Percocet, nothing more than Tylenol. They're oxycodone products, the same as Oxycontin. So Oxycontin and Percs are the same drug. Main difference you'll see there are Percs are what's called IR, meaning instant release. So as soon as I take that Percocet or that Percodan, the entire drug is broke down at that time in my body, doing its job. Oxycontin is what's called ER, extended release, over a period of 12 hours. Very effective medications when used properly, but heavily diverted. You know, Purdue Pharma, if you take the time to do some research, they came out with a patent for Oxycontin way back in 1995. And originally they prescribed that drug for acute pain and acute pain only, meaning pain from now lasting to about 90 days. But eventually what they did shortly after the acute pain was prescribed, then they started to prescribe it for chronic pain. Probably shouldn't have done that. And that would be pain over a period of time. All of a sudden people were abusing the drug, becoming dependent and addicted to the drug, overdosing, even dying. Purdue Pharma went into denial there about the opioids being addictive, especially that one. Federal investigation led to an indictment of some of the top individuals from Purdue Pharma pleading guilty to deceiving doctors and the general public. The company went into federal court and paid a $630-some million fine because of that deception. And then what'd they do? Because of that investigation, Purdue Pharma changed the formulation in late 2010, early 2011. They added non-water soluble binders with the product, something they should have done way back in '95. So you can no longer crush it up and bypass that time release because of those binders. You look at that middle picture, that's what it's going to look like. The old formulation of Oxycontin, if you look at the upper right picture, you'll see they were able to put it in a spoon, liquefy it, take a syringe, draw it up, and find a vein and inject it. Because of those binders now, you can't do that anymore. You see the bottom right picture? It's going to do what they will refer to as gelling up. So you hear somebody talking about, can't get past the gel. How do I break the gel down? They're talking about this formulation of Oxycontin. Because of this change doesn't mean we've won. Many will leave that gel version in the spoon and they will heat it up. They'll vaporize it, take that cut straw and take the vapor in to get that drug. Others tell us they'll warm up a small amount of Coca-Cola or Pepsi-Cola. They'll put that small amount of warmed up pop on the spoon with the gel version. They tell Sean and I that the acid from those pops will help break this new formulation down. So I guarantee you they'll continue to try and find a way to get the oxycodone from those particular pills.
Yeah, this next drug we're going to be talking about is gabapentin, and some of you may know it better as Neurontin. This one has made a huge surgence in the illegal drug trade in the state of Ohio and the Midwest. You know, this drug historically was prescribed as a seizure medication or as a nerve pain medication. Now we're seeing it prescribed all over the map. Migraine headaches, general pain, some of our drug treatment centers, they are prescribing it as an anti-anxiety medication like you would Valium and Xanax. So because so much of it is being prescribed, we're seeing a lot of it diverted on the streets. Couple things we hear about from heroin users, and heroin's the next drug we're going to be talking about. When we're on heroin, our tolerance for that drug builds very rapidly. In other words, the heroin I'm doing today, 3 months from now, isn't going to cut it. I'm going to need more because my tolerance for that drug is building. So there's a couple reasons that heroin users will try and get a prescription for gabapentin or Neurontin. And they'll call them Gabbies on the street. The first thing we hear about is they'll get the prescription for the gabapentin and take it in conjunction with the heroin. Why? Well, think about it. If I'm taking gabapentin in conjunction with the heroin, it's going to slow that tolerance and I won't need as much of it as rapidly as I would if I wasn't with the gabapentin. Another thing we hear about is they'll get a prescription for the gabapentin and hoard them. Why? Well, think about it. If I go to my heroin dealer today, knock on that door, someone else answers the door and says, look, he got locked up last night, the cops raided us, we don't have anything for you. Now what I'm going to start to do is go into physical withdrawal. And that feels like 10 times the worst case of flu you can imagine. So I'm going to go into physical withdrawal and what a lot of people will refer to as dope sick. So what I'll do, since I'm going into dope sick, I'll go home, get my gabapentin, and take in thousands of milligrams of it because it'll help with some of those cravings so I don't feel that sickness. So those are a couple of things we hear about why you would use gabapentin in conjunction with the heroin.
You know, a lot of times when Sean and I are lecturing, we'll have, whether it's schools, the teachers, the parents, or someone in the workplace there, hey, if I find a pill, how do I identify it? Well, as you can see from the PowerPoint, Sean and I put 3 different smartphone apps up there, and also the poison control number. Obviously, you find a pill, you're not sure what it is, go ahead, put that poison control number in your smartphone, give them a call, they'll help you identify it. The smartphone app's really excellent. So what a lot of law enforcement throughout the nation are currently carrying. And all you do with whatever app is put the identifiers from that pill in that smartphone app. And then it's going to tell you what the drug is, who the manufacturer is, and some of the issues if one is using that substance at that particular time. Very, very informative apps there.
All right, the next drug we're going to talk about is heroin. Now, why would we put heroin in our presentation directly thereafter pharmaceuticals? Because that's generally the next progression on the street. On average, 80% of heroin users, right before they started doing heroin the first time, what drug were they doing before that? The pharmaceuticals like Mike just talked about, 80%. Heroin comes from the opium poppy plant, millions of opium poppies grown in Afghanistan, Southeast Asia, South America, and now Mexico. The last DEA report I saw, 93% of the heroin supply is coming across that southwest border controlled by the Mexican drug cartels. We have basically in the United States 2 forms of heroin. We have black tar heroin and we have powdered heroin. Black tar heroin is the first one I'm going to talk about. Black tar is definitely on the decline, powdered heroin on the rise, and that is simply because we have so much of the powdered heroin now being mixed with one of the fentanyl or fentanyl analogs. If you see black tar heroin in your world, what will it look like? Well, as you can see by the screen, it's generally historically sold in little latex balloons on the left, little foil balls on the right. You open up either one of them, you're going to find a piece of wax paper with a tiny speck of black tar heroin. Going to be much, much smaller than my pinky fingernail and be very pliable. Almost will remind you like asphalt roofing tar, and a lot of it will have a vinegar odor to it. They mix vinegar with a lot of drugs to break them down, but particularly heroin. Mix vinegar with the heroin, go to cook it up, breaks it down to liquid form really well to put it up into the vein. That's why you will have generally a vinegar odor. These are considered unit doses. A unit dose of heroin is about 1/10 to 2/10 of a gram. So if you think of a sweet and low sugar packet we put in our iced tea, that is a gram in weight. 1/10 of that is a unit dose. So for heroin users, we're talking very, very small amounts. The second version is the most popular version, and that is the powdered heroin. Don't get hung up on the color of this powdered heroin. Seen a lot of different colors. Seen it off-white to a beige, light brown, dark brown, black powder, pink powder, and a lot of those colors are coming from the fentanyl analogs. Primarily in Ohio, it is off-white or beige. Therefore, most people will call it China white or they'll call it China Blanco. Much, if not all, the China white in our state is either mixed with fentanyl or it's only fentanyl just being represented as heroin. If you're not familiar with fentanyl, it is on average 80 to 100 times more powerful than morphine, 30 to 50 times more powerful than street-level heroin. So imagine, I go to my heroin dealer every day getting that normal package of heroin. Maybe multiple times a day I'm going to this dealer. Well, this time I go to my heroin dealer and instead of having fentanyl or heroin, he's got fentanyl. I don't know that there's fentanyl in it. Even my drug dealer may not know there's fentanyl in it. Well, if I do that same amount I use every day and this time it's really fentanyl and not heroin, what's probably going to happen to me? I'm going to overdose and potentially die. In the state of Ohio, listen to these statistics. 2013, we had 84 fentanyl-related overdose deaths. 2 years later, in 2015, that 84 went to 1,155. I'm going to show you some statistics in just a few minutes that's going to blow your mind with the number of fentanyl-related overdose deaths we're having right now. A lot of people will stop me, especially business owners will stop us at this point and say, what you're telling me right now makes no sense. Why, as a businessman, would I want to mix a deadly drug like fentanyl in with my heroin? Aren't you killing off all your customers? Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that cartel cares about your death or mine? What's that cartel care about? Money. That cartel doesn't care about anything but money. They don't care about death. Those 3 or 4 customers that die this week, I got 5 or 6 more that's going to replace them next week. The only thing we care about is profits. So let's talk about that. Let's take a kilogram of heroin and put it here, and a kilogram of fentanyl and put it right beside it. If you don't know what a kilogram is, think of that sweet and low sugar packet times 1,000, a 2.2 pound brick-shaped package. Do you know what the average profit for that cartel is if it's heroin? It's probably about $80,000 to $100,000 per kilo. Do you know what the profit is if it's fentanyl? 1.5 to 2 million. So you be the judge why they go with fentanyl. It's pretty easy to see. The profits are going to skyrocket. The next slide is going to show you the fentanyl analogs that were in the state of Ohio as of last year. The one I want to talk about and touch on just briefly is third from the bottom, and that's carfentanil. I don't know if you guys are familiar with carfentanil, but it's an animal tranquilizer. And we're not talking about puppies and kittens here. What are we talking about? Elephants, rhinos, hippos, and horses. Carfentanil is said to be 100 times more powerful than all the other fentanyl analogs. So this is what the DEA identified in Ohio last year. Guess what we're seeing now? So we went from here to here in 1 year. You can see the huge amount of fentanyl analog increases. So if I haven't depressed you guys enough, let me take it one step further. Fentanyl is one of the only drugs that can actually absorb through the skin. So if you get a cut or a scrape on your arm and you get fentanyl in it, it can be harmful, potentially even deadly. However, if you get on the Center for Disease Control's website, they'll tell you accidental exposure of fentanyl through skin absorption, the likelihood of a death there is very, very low. However, the likelihood of a death due to accidental inhalation can be much, much higher. You guys have probably all heard all the stories about the cops, the firefighters, the medics accidentally getting exposed to fentanyl. What happens? They overdose and have to be brought back with Narcan or naloxone, the antidote. We're seeing that all over the country. So what we tell our law enforcement, our medics and firefighters, healthcare workers that we train, if you find a powdery substance out there, don't mess with it. Make sure none of your skin's exposed. You're wearing nitrile gloves, some sort of eye protection, and mask. Until we know the true capability of these drugs, we've got to err on the side of caution. So what would we like you to share with those in your world? If you have heroin users in your world, or you have friends that have heroin users in their world, and they're still taking care of them. In other words, they're still laundering their clothes. They're still cleaning their bedroom. If they come across a powdery substance, please tell them not to mess with it because microscopic amounts of it can be deadly. Put it this way. I was in Baltimore, Maryland at a training, and a bunch of us were being trained by the lead chemist of DEA on fentanyl, and he said it perfectly, so I'm going to kind of steal what he said. He said, imagine taking a little salt packet, ripping that salt packet open and throwing it on the table in front of you. 2 grains of that salt, 2 grains. Should that be fentanyl and you ingest it, could be deadly. That's how powerful these drugs are. The next slide is going to show you a health advisory that came out by the Ohio Department of Health February 21st of 2018. These are deaths in Ohio involving fentanyl. Believe me when I say this, 2013 when fentanyl hit Ohio, it changed the game, and this will show you that. Back in 2013, 4% of our overdose deaths in Ohio, fentanyl was in the body. See how these have increased. 2016, 58% of the decedents had heroin in the body. 2017, preliminary statistics are out, and guess what? 71%. So almost 3 out of every 4 Ohioans that die from an overdose death, fentanyl's in the body. It has changed the game. When we talk to the kids, this is the next thing we talk about. Even a lot of the adults, they think buying pharmaceuticals on the street is a lot better than buying heroin or fentanyl because you know what's in it. It's not true. We have a lot of organizations now that will take powdered heroin, powdered fentanyl with some pill dye, take a pill press it into pill form, score the outside of the pill to make it look like a perk or an oxy. So it is literally Russian roulette buying any pharmaceutical on the street because it could contain heroin, fentanyl, or a combination of both.
All right, Sean and I now are going to show you a 3-minute video that we think kind of puts it in perspective when it comes to the opioid and the crisis there. We would like to forewarn anyone that's struggling or has a loved one struggling with substance use disorder that this can be very emotional. There's many sessions where Sean and I have shown this where some individuals have to step out. So we don't want to create any pain for anyone that's out there. So if you need to take a break for about 3 minutes and come back in, we definitely understand that. However, if everybody's ready, we're going to go forward now and show you the video. Okay, we're getting ready to wrap up our 1-hour training here. As Sean had mentioned earlier, we want to provide all of you with websites that Sean and I use continuously throughout the week there. And as you can see from the PowerPoint, there's a number of different websites, all of them very, very valuable. I'm going to touch on just a few of those. You see the top one, I'm sure most of us are aware of, urbandictionary.com. That's an excellent venue for you to go to if you hear a term or a phrase. It's going to help you maybe explain what that might mean. The next two, the Arrowwood and Blue Light, those are pro-drug websites. What better way for us to get intelligence or find out what's happening than a pro-drug website? In other words, what I'm talking about here, individuals use these two websites to maybe post their experiences there, some of the things they've done where they've combined a drug, when the drug takes off in the body, how long that particular feeling lasts. So very, very informative. Also, these websites will have a slang dictionary area there within the website. So you hear a phrase in your world and you don't know what that term might mean, you can go to those websites and search that particular term and maybe identify what it means. We always have to remember though, if I'm in your world and I know you know the traditional terms, I will create my own terminology. So I don't know of any website out there that's going to have everything that's going on out there. The drugabuse.gov and halens.org, they kind of speak for themselves there. The top, I should say the bottom four there, the very one at the bottom, the FBI.gov website, that's an excellent video. You used to have to go onto their website to see it. It's called Chasing the Dragon. It's now available on YouTube. That is probably one of the most powerful videos Sean and I have seen in our career. Very emotional video there for many, but it'll take you through so many families that have loved ones maybe started on legit pain medication and how it develops into serious issues with some of them actually losing their life there. It is about 50 minutes long, and we always suggest to the attendees this would be a good video to watch as a family. If you have kids from 7th grade on up, to watch this particular video. Up above, the three above, the FBI Chasing the Dragon, are excellent for families. A lot of times we'll have someone in the workplace say, hey, I have a teenager that's 16 and also I have a youngster that's 9 years old. How can I talk to those kids because of those different age groups there? That's a good way for us to go and start some of that conversation by looking at those websites. Where to get help. If you're in the state of Ohio, this is a pretty big one for us. That top one is the first one that Sean and I will throw out to most everyone out there, mha.ohio.ohio.gov. And this is providers by county. So no matter what county you live in the state of Ohio, you enter that county information and it's going to let you know where to go for treatment, rehabilitation, and those type of issues. The rest are basically national, international references there. Here is our personal information. Sean and I always provide to Ascent and any companies we're lecturing to our personal information. Why is that? Because there's not usually a session we do where we don't get someone calling us saying, hey, what does this mean? This is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm hearing, maybe with a loved one. Can you guys help me out? Give Sean and I a call. We're not going to charge you for that. We're doing interventions, whether it's in person or on the phone, weekly there. A lot of times we'll have parents or maybe workplace, they find something that they don't know what that particular piece of paraphernalia is. Take a picture of it. Either email it to Sean and I or send us a photo. We'll help you identify that. The information we talk about is private. We don't share your information with anyone. No one can get in trouble if they give us a call. So we're there. If you need assistance, please feel free to get with us.
Mike and I would like to thank you for choosing Ascent Safety Solutions for your drug-free safety program training.